Greetings, dear listeners. No, it's not Warren today. Tonight, we have a black-eyed kid story for your listening pleasure. Let's jump right in. I was a lonely kid. We moved to town when I was in the 5th grade. All the other kids had known each other for their entire lives and didn't need any new friends. So I hung out by myself. Our house stood at the top of the street, near the tracks, and across from the ravine leading down to the creek. I was told to stay out of the woods and to stay away from the tracks, so I spent all my time exploring them. One cloudy afternoon, I went exploring at a trail atop a ridge at a bend in the creek. I thought I was all alone, as I hadn't seen a single living soul after crossing the tracks and entering the trees. But, glancing back, I saw a kid following me. I think he called, "Wait up!" I think, but it was more like I'd heard it in my mind, not out loud. I stared at him as he came towards me. He was a funny-looking kid. Short. He couldn't have been more than 4 foot tall and spindly, with the whitest skin I'd ever seen. His skin was so pale, almost bloodless. The hair was funny too, really black and long, falling into his eyes. His eyes. There was something funny about them too, although I couldn't have explained exactly why I thought so. He was dressed in all black, which was weird. The only person who I knew that wore black was Mr. Graves, the minister. The kid stopped about 6 feet away from me and didn't appear to want to come any closer. "Want to see a dead dog?" he said. At least I think he said it. I didn't really see his lips move, but I heard him clear enough. I didn't really want to see it, but I didn't want to appear chicken either. So I said, "Okay." The kid turned away from me and began walking back up the path. This is kind of hard to explain. I had trouble following him with my eyes. He seemed to disappear for a moment, then reappear again. It was confusing. We seemed to be going a long way. "Hey, where are we going?" I called out to the kid. Again, I heard the voice in my head. "It's just up ahead." The kid's back was turned away from me, so I couldn't tell if he was actually talking to me out loud or not. And then, I sort of lost track of time. All I can remember was walking, and then we were standing beside the signals bridge, which spanned the tracks. It was on the other side of a major street from the woods where I'd met the kid, but I didn't remember crossing the road. "How'd we get here?" The kid was pointing at something lying beside the tracks. It was a dead dog. Its head had been ripped off, and the brown fur was covered with hordes of flies. I could actually hear them buzzing before I saw the dog. It was gross, but I found that I couldn't look away. I stared at it for I don't know how long before suddenly I snapped out of it. I was snapped out of it by the blaring horn of a speeding locomotive bearing down on me as I stood there like a dummy. I just managed to jump from the tracks when the train was less than 100 yards from me, and I ran all the way home, where I stayed for the rest of the evening. In fact, I stayed in for a few days. I was totally freaked out. I couldn't explain what had happened. It was like the freaky kid had hypnotized me or something. And who the heck was he anyway? And where did he go? I saw him again about 4 days later, when I looked out the window of my grade 5 classroom. He was standing at the frost fence that separated the schoolyard from the nearby apartment complex. He must have been a football fields away from me, a thick, black line with a white head. But I knew the kid was staring at me. and I could feel him, hear him in my head. "Come here." I looked towards him and shook my head. I didn't want to go. Besides, I was sitting in class, I couldn't just leave. At recess, I stood around with a bunch of guys who were trash-talking the Leafs. I wasn't interested in hockey, but I didn't really want to be alone. The strange kid had come into the schoolyard, but no one noticed him, even though he was funny-looking. "Come with me. I want to show you something," he said, speaking without making a sound, without moving his lips, but directly into my mind. "No. Last time you tried to kill me," I said back to him. But unfortunately I spoke out loud. "Come with me." "No." "What's with Screwball?" Geordie asked the other guys. Screwball was me, at least that was my name around school. "Weirdo's talking to himself." Davy then laughed. "Hey, are you all right?" Alan asked. He was one of the few kids that was nice to me. I didn't say anything else. It was obvious they couldn't see the weird kid. Someone fetched a teacher. I was taken to the nurse, and glad to be away from the kid, but was worried he may be waiting for me outside after school. But I didn't see him then. I awoke in darkness. I didn't know what time it was. I was in grade 5, I didn't have a watch, but I knew it must have been very late. It was so late and quiet. It must have been the middle of the night. The strange kid was standing at the foot of my bed. "Come," he said, once again speaking without moving his lips or making a sound. "Come, I have something to show you. On the tracks." "No," I tried to yell, but I couldn't make a sound. Instead, I climbed out of bed. A policeman stopped me as I was crossing the street and heading for the dirt path leading to the railroad tracks barefoot and clad in only my pajamas. According to the cop, I was sleepwalking and only semi-conscious, so rather than the usual punishment, I was sent for counselling. I was more frightened of that than I was frightened of any physical punishment, and wondered if I should tell the doctor about the weird kid. But the night before my appointment, the kid was outside my bedroom window. The window was closed, and I couldn't really see his lips move, but I could hear his voice quite distinctively. "Don't tell about me, or I'll kill your mum and dad. I'll know if you tell." I didn't say a word. In the end, they sent me to stay with my grandparents who lived out west, and I stayed there for many years. At first I dreamt about the strange kid a lot, and sometimes I thought I saw him, but he was always far away, always at a distance. Eventually, I forgot about him, until he came back. I was 19 years old the next time I saw the kid, and under rather embarrassing circumstances. I was in the back seat of my old Camry on the darkened road on the outskirts of the city, when the young woman I was with suddenly whispered, "There's someone there." I looked up, and staring from the back seat was the weird kid from my childhood. I was about to yell obscenities at him, but he silenced me with an imperious, "Come with me." And so I went, half undressed, but I went with him. She was standing in the shadows of the trees, her body concealed by a long black cloak, and she was naked underneath. Her skin was alabaster white and seemed to glow in the darkness. I don't remember what happened after that, but I can guess. Perhaps I blotted it out. In any case, by the time I got back to the Camry, 3 hours had elapsed, and my girlfriend was gone. I never saw her again. I might have brooded over these events, but instead I moved on quickly, quite literally, as a few weeks later I headed off for a university in another town. The Great Escape. Only once in my 4 years at school did I see the kid. This was off in the distance under a streetlight, as if waiting for me. But I was coming home from the pub. and had a skin on, to put it mildly. So I figured I was just tired and had imagined it. I graduated, moved to Calgary, got a job, got married and became the father of 2 wonderful children. Years passed. But then something unusual happened. I got offered a job, a very good job, in my old hometown, and so came back. In retrospect, that might have been a big mistake. The place had certain associations I had forgotten, but which hadn't forgotten me. I had been back for several months when I was awakened in the wee small hours of the night to find my nemesis, the strange boy with the white skin and dark hair and clothes, standing at my bedside. I felt a cold hand immediately crush my heart. "Who are you?" I whispered, not wanting to wake my wife. Its answer was simple. "Come." I got out of bed as quietly as I could, and followed the small figure down the darkened hallway. "Where are we going?" It didn't answer. Instead, it led me into the backyard, and I couldn't help thinking, I hope none of the neighbors see this. She was waiting for us. The instant I became aware of her, it all came back to me. Everything that had happened that night, and I shuddered in shame and revulsion. A little girl stood next to the woman. Her long, lank hair was blonde, but appeared to be as dull and colourless as her dead white skin. She was all in black as well, wearing what looked like a strange old-fashioned dress complete with bows. I knew who she was without having to ask. She was mine. "What are you?" I hissed, trying hard to keep my voice down. "We are family," the kid said. "Not my family." I barely kept myself from shouting. "Don't you remember the lights?" The instant she said those words, I remembered everything. I had been tucked into bed, but wide awake. There were bright lights outside, which made the interior of the room almost seem as bright as if it had been daylight. I got out of bed and left my room, something I wouldn't normally do unless I had to go to the bathroom, but tonight I felt compelled to go outside, something for which I would be punished for if caught. The strange kid was waiting for me, on the road in front of the house. I was surprised to see a square, glowing white object with a ramp leading into the equally bright interior. The kid entered, and I followed. Inside the building, I was assailed by a weird pulsing sound, which made me feel disoriented and frightened. We continued into a big dark room, like an examining room, with bright oscillating lights creating a strobe effect. The room seemed filled by shadowy crowds, some stereotypical grey aliens, some of the strange pale-skinned people all dressed in black, but others appeared to be normal people. I even thought I saw my parents and a few police officers. Without a word or thought, I climbed onto an operating table. I seemed to know exactly what to do. Directly above me and attached to the ceiling loomed a huge metallic needle, and as I watched, it was lowered towards me. It pierced the skin of my abdomen, and I screamed, or at least I think I did. Then I passed out, or at least blacked out. What happened next? What did they do to me? I said to myself. But my strange companion heard me apparently, and by telepathy answered. It was an experiment in working with genetic material, with DNA. I never got a chance to ask who was conducting the experiment nor why, when the odd boy's words filled my brain and stunned me. I am, genetically speaking, your brother. I think I began screaming then, no longer worried about waking up the entire neighborhood, but no one heard me. No one heard a thing. When I finally calmed down, I think I asked the thing, because I could only think of it as a thing. If we're family, why did you try and kill me and threaten my parents? The answer? You had so much. I had nothing. Put it down as sibling rivalry. I wasn't buying it. You're evil. Demonic. The kid didn't reply, but turned and began heading down towards my son's room. Again, he or it read my mind. No harm will come to your child. We went into the room and stood over my son's crib. He lay on his back without moving, but he was wide awake, in spite of it being in the middle of the night. He smiled up at us, and I could see his eyes were two pools of stagnant darkness. Total black eyes, identical to the ebony blackness of the eyes of my brother. So are we family? Family. Hey there, and thank you so very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's story with the black-eyed children. Be sure to let us know what you thought of it down below. This has been Mort from Mortis Media, your narrator tonight, but no doubt Warren will return soon to keep you entertained. In the meantime, I do suggest that you subscribe to A Warning to the Curious and press the little bell icon for even more stories. But for now, stay safe, and until midnight.